There is a lot to sort out when moving to a new country. Visas, language, culture. Oh yeah, and finding a place to live. Hi, welcome back to Ari Wanders. My name is Ari, and this is a channel where we are wandering through the world one idea at a time. Make sure to subscribe to join the journey. The first time I moved to Medellin, I booked my first couple weeks in a hostel and then 1 month in a co-living while I looked for a long-term apartment. And I ended up finding an apartment that suited me my first week on Facebook Marketplace. So when I returned this time, I was thinking and hoping the process would be just as easy as it was the last time. And of course, I was wrong. As C.S. Lewis said, things never happen the same way twice. It's one of those things where you know it's true, but you can't help but be optimistic. I bought my one-way ticket for early December, and the North American winter season is the busy season for Medellin, Colombia. Knowing this, I booked apartments through Airbnb in December and January so I wouldn't get stuck in a less than desirable living situation. Being a digital nomad, almost 100% of my work is online, so the place where I live is also the place where I work, making having a place that's quiet and comfortable with strong Wi-Fi an absolute necessity. I was partially hoping that one of the Airbnbs that I had initially booked for December or January would turn into a potentially good long-term situation. I could negotiate with the owner of the Airbnb for an off-platform rate and then continue to rent directly with cash. Unfortunately, neither of those places quite suited me, and I was still looking for other options. And this began my wild search for a long-term rental in Medellin, Colombia. And I found that there are many options for finding a place. These are the ones that I am currently aware of. I'm going to try to organize these from highest price to lowest price, starting with luxury end and going all the way down to best for budget. If budget isn't that big of a concern for you, there are multiple websites that offer luxury, high-end, pre-furnished apartments. I don't have direct experience with these websites because though the apartments look absolutely beautiful, they are way outside my budget. The next option is one that I've used many times, which is Airbnb. Airbnb has all kinds of different options, everything from renting your own home to an apartment to a room inside of a co-living place or a room inside someone's primary residence. With many of these places, you can initially book through the platform for the first month or so and then negotiate off-platform with the owner for a better deal. Of course, this takes away any of the backing that Airbnb had for you or for the owner, so that's something to keep in mind. I personally haven't heard any serious disaster stories, but these are things to keep in mind. When you're dealing with an individual person instead of a platform, things can get a little bit weird. I have some unique experiences of my own, but we'll save that for another time. Places on Airbnb can run anywhere from $300 to thousands of dollars a month. It depends a lot on location and what kind of residence it is. Keeping a constant eye on the platform can be very helpful as you may come across new listings that offer places for a very discounted rate. I've looked out a couple times before and staying in a place that would have been almost double the price, but I got a good deal because I was one of the first people who booked it. One of the other options available in Medellin is co-living. These co-living centers are a modern expression of community living. These spaces offer the advantage of having shared facilities like nicer kitchens, rooftop decks, terraces, sometimes pools or workout centers. The idea is they've thought of everything that you might need and put it into one building. They also often have events and opportunities to meet and connect with your neighbors, just in case you move there by yourself and you're looking for community connections. I've personally stayed in a couple of these co-living centers in Medellin, and they're okay. Oftentimes these spaces photograph very well and look like a really good idea, but what I find is the privacy factor is a little bit lacking. Mostly in noise pollution. Sometimes the events that are hosted involve loud music, and if you want to go to bed early or if you work at those hours, it can be very disturbing. I've also noticed that a lot of these places have been constructed and renovated, mostly keeping in mind aesthetics rather than functionality. So a lot of times I found that the noise barrier between me and my neighbors or myself in the hallway was not great. Keep in mind that in these co-living centers, the facilities listed are usually shared spaces. This could include laundry, most of the rooftop or terrace spaces, workout centers, and oftentimes a kitchen. The idea is that everyone should be able to share these spaces, respect each other, and keep them clean. I think that co-living centers are probably ideal for people who aren't super noise sensitive and would really like to connect with other people in their living spaces while they're traveling long term. As I mentioned for my first time staying in Colombia, Facebook Marketplace is also a place where you can find apartments. Now, even though I found my first place there, the process of searching for an apartment on Facebook Marketplace in Colombia can be rather frustrating. Sometimes the apartments are listed in USD and sometimes they're listed in pesos, and it can be very hard to tell which is which. Also, of course, you have the apartments that are listed for obnoxiously low prices, just so they land at the top of the list if you sort from lowest to highest price. I found that communication can often be frustrating and confusing depending on who is renting the apartment. Sometimes it's a real estate agent through an agency, sometimes it's a private rental, and you never know what you're getting into until you either message the person or sometimes until you actually show up at the property. If you're renting through Facebook Marketplace, always make sure to actually do a walkthrough of the property, as pictures can be kind of deceiving, and since Facebook isn't actually set up as a property rental platform, they don't have the review system or the insurance policies or anything like that Airbnb or other platforms like it would have to offer you. Another option would be if you know someone who is renting an apartment or subletting an apartment. Sometimes you can post on, again, the Facebook community groups, or there are some Medellin community WhatsApp groups where you can ask questions and ask if anybody might be renting their place. I'll stick the link to enter those groups below. There are also multiple local online rental sites, but I don't necessarily recommend these, as when I messaged about the properties, I usually had to wait a very long time for an answer, and when I did hear back from the people, I usually heard that the place was already rented or sold or just not available in the first place. In general, I think these tend to be a huge waste of time. Another unique solution to finding an apartment in Medellin is simply walking around and looking for rental signs and then calling the real estate agent or owner. One thing that you have to keep in mind when renting in Medellin is that many places require a fiador, which means you need someone who is Colombian, who has a certain amount of money to actually co-sign on your lease for the apartment. The chances of finding one of these fiadors is really rare, and on top of that, I think it's kind of morally questionable. Personally, I would never have anyone else sign for my payments or my debt, but that's the system here. The way to get around it is to have someone agree to rent the apartment to you without a fiador. And that can be hard to find, but it's not impossible, especially if your Spanish is particularly strong or you have a friend helping you out. I had a friend who found a neighborhood she was interested in, and she just walked around calling the number on every single sign for a place available. She ended up finding a place, and she was able to make an agreement with the owner without a fiador. So that is a possibility if you're up for a little bit of an adventure. One of the cheapest options that you have in Medellin, apart from a long-term hostel stay, would be comparto aparto. This is kind of like the budgeted version of co-living. You rent out one room in a house or an apartment, and you share all of the communal living spaces with other people. There are individual places available on this platform, but generally it's set up for people who are renting one room inside a house or an apartment where you get the room to yourself, but the communal living areas are all shared. These places are generally not as aesthetically pleasing as co-living spaces, but they come in at half or less of the price. My current apartment I obtained on Get Vico, which is a website I had never previously heard of. The website mechanics are definitely a little bit on the older side and not as fluid as something like Airbnb. However, I find the prices are a little bit lower. I've also noticed that the places that you rent are a little bit more local feeling. The whole process took a lot longer than any other rental situation that I've tried. I had one failed booking where I tried to book a place that said it was available, and then it turned out it was not available. So that was a little bit frustrating. And then I went to view another place. The apartment itself was lovely, but I just didn't like the street that it was on. Finally, I landed on this place. And here was the good and bad of it. First of all, there was pretty good communication. The responses were very quick and they all felt personal. But in the end, it's about acting quickly and having the highest offer. It's still business. I was not able to view the apartment before I actually booked it. This was offered, and they even offered to let me do a video call with the current renter. But then pressure was applied as I was told there was another person who was offering to book the place, and if I didn't book immediately and for a long amount of time, I would lose it. I was pretty confident about the place, so I went ahead and booked it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that to anyone else. I just had a good gut feeling and I went for it. And that is how I landed in this little apartment in Medellin, Colombia. I hope you find these tips, tricks, and resources helpful if you're searching for an apartment in Medellin, Colombia. Feel free to ask any questions in the comment section below. I don't promise to have all the answers, but maybe someone else will. Also, feel free to dish on any weird or wonderful rental experiences you've had around the world. I would love to hear stories about places you've rented, landlords you've interacted with, and neighbors. Also, what kind of rental space do you usually prefer? Do you like sharing a space with other people, or do you prefer having your own private space? Let us know what and why in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and until next time, keep wandering.